ESPN's Emmy Award-winning 30 for 30 documentary film series presents the greatest mixtape ever. The story of how a series of streetball videos set to music in the 90s transformed basketball's place in the culture, defined the lives of the players who starred in those videos, and changed the game itself forever. Stream now on ESPN Plus and listen to the companion 30 for 30 podcast, a streetball mixtape exploring the essence of streetball through a collection of legendary stories. Listen now on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post Podcast, Tuesday afternoon, verging on evening on the East Coast. The NBA Finals, begin. I almost sounded like Ric Flair there. Begin in about, 53 hours or some such thing. This might be the most excited I have been for an NBA Finals since 2016 when the 73-win Warriors faced LeBron and the Cavaliers, now healthy in a rematch after Kyrie and Kevin Love got injured the year before. A finals that looms large over all Steph Curry-related discourse that will be on volume 11 for the next 2 weeks, assuming this goes long. What a thrilling finals between the Boston Celtics, who have been the best team in the NBA since mid-January, and the Golden State Warriors in their 6th finals in 8 years, against a team that, in limited opportunities, is they are only inter-conference rivals as opposed to intra-conference rivals. Have only played each other twice a season. The Celtics have played the Warriors quite well, have a winning record against the Warriors in the Steve Kerr era, the only NBA franchise that can claim that. And yet, kind of left a bad taste in your mouth in those last 3 minutes of the Eastern Conference Finals against the fight Miami Heat. To help sort all of this out, the people's favorite guest wearing an old school monochrome Atlanta Braves hat. No red on that hat. Kevin Arnovitz, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Are you excited?
I'm psyched. I'm with you. I love this matchup, Zach. Because first of all, I am someone who's pro-dynasty in the sense that I like to see teams establish themselves and kind of watch that multi-season journey. And what's cool about the Warriors is they do have legacy, but this team's still kind of a work in progress. We're still just getting to know Andrew Wiggins, the functional, awesome NBA wing. The Celtics are a blast. I do like defense. Big, large wings who attack, or it's generally produce fun basketball. The Robert Williams experience. I like this matchup, Zach. I'm with you. I can't remember the last time I was this excited for a finals.
Before we move on to the finals, can we just discuss what almost happened in the last 3 minutes and 30 seconds of the Eastern Conference Finals? Because I know it's been discussed to death. It also happened over a holiday weekend, and I'm not sure of the magnitude of it has really been put into perspective. The Celtics were ahead 98-85 with 3 minutes and 15 seconds left to go. They were ahead by 7 with a minute 30 left. And you blinked, and Jimmy Butler was taking a 3 to win the game potentially and win the series. And in between that blink, Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown combined to make 7 horrible decisions in a very small period of time. Marcus Smart just kept shooting, man. I want that kill shot. Give me the kill shot. There's 10 on the shot clock, and all we have to do is run clock. Boom, I'm letting it fly. Am I a 32% three-point shooter? Who cares? I don't. Kill shot. Jaylen Brown gets the ball, K.A. I think it was a 5-point game still. Or I don't even remember. It was either 5 or 7 with 50 seconds left. And 20 on the shot clock is you know what sounds like a good idea? I'm going to drive right into Bam Adebayo's face and try to make a layup for some reason, when really, if we run clock here, the game is over. Offensive foul, Max Strus 3, holy what the hell's happening? What, the Jimmy Butler has the ball? That might go in? It's Kevin, if the Celtics had lost that game, off the top of my head over the last 48 hours, I can't think of what would have been a worse loss ever in basketball. I'm sure there's one that I'm forgetting, But this is, and certainly teams have gagged away leads before, but this was Game 7 of the conference finals for a team that has been to that round 4 times in the last 6 years and was yet to advance. It would be up there with the Oilers blowing a 20 or like a 35-3 lead against the Bills, and it would be like the worst loss ever.
Yeah, I think we'd have to slot it above. I mean, above, because it was Game 6, right? The Clippers, that was spectacular, but it wasn't, and it was sort of the die had been cast, I think, by that point. And then obviously the Clippers, Denver. Why do I always end up with the Clippers in this question? I can't think of a more, because the Spurs.
No, this would have been worse. This would have been worse than any of the Clippers losses. It would have been worse. No
the
question.
Spurs Heat wasn't a. I mean, you could argue it was a squander, but it was more the Heat took it than there was. You can look at just some terrible decision making. There was none of that, really.
That's a good one. I don't think that game was ever as like implausibly completely over as the Celtics Heat game should have been.
No. The yellow tape tends to deceive us. But no, there was that one rebound, but you're right, there was also no self-imposed just disaster there. There's nothing you can point to and say, hey, why is Marcus Smart shooting? Why is Jaylen Brown driving? Why is clock management an issue here?
And the Spurs had another game to play after losing the Ray Allen game. They had another game in the bag still. And by the way, Marcus Smart gets all the heat because he does take the occasional like crazy shots. The Jaylen Brown one was worse to me. That was the worst. I literally was gasping in disbelief as he was driving towards it. I couldn't believe it. And it does. That's the kind of game where if you lose, I think like changes would have happened to the roster potentially. It would have been such a bad loss. Like that's how bad of a loss it would have been. And it does inform my thinking on this finals, which we will now transition to, because for several reasons. Number one, I don't really care about the Boston crunch time woes because this is a team that didn't play crunch time for the last 50 games of the season because they just blew the shit out of everybody. And when you win a game like Game 6 in Milwaukee in the fourth quarter with your season on the line, you prove that you have the bona fides. Is that how I say that? I read it, whatever that stupid phrase is. You've proven something to me. But the turnover issues that the Celtics had against Miami, going into a series now against a team that forces a ton of turnovers and is absolutely lethal with Clay and Steph running the wings in transition and Draymond handling the ball after steals, combined with some of the mental, like, what's going on here decision-making, combined with Rob Williams looking immobile and unplayable in Game 7 of that series, on paper, Boston is a better team than the Warriors. I think player for player, man for man, defense for defense, these are the two best defenses in the league. I think they're a little bit better. In reality, the Warriors have home court advantage, and it just feels like the playoffs have been a smoother navigation for them. And I'll end with this before transitioning to your big picture look at it. The Celtics have had a really impressive run. The Nets, KD, the Bucks, Giannis, the Heat, who will not give you an inch ever. And yet, given how great Boston was in the last 50 games of the season, is it also kind of fair to feel like it's a little disappointing that the Bucks took them to 7 and almost won the series without Chris Middleton? That the Heat took them to 7 and almost stole that series with Jimmy Butler invisible for half of it due to injury, with Kyle Lowry invisible for most of it due to injury, with Tyler Hero literally not playing essentially the last 3 games? Is it a little bit like they kind of should have won those series in shorter order? And there's an air of mystery. There's an unexpectedly large air of mystery about the Celtics than you would expect, larger than you would expect given how dominant they were in the regular season and that they're in the finals, and yet it still feels like I kind of don't know how confident to feel in them. Do you relate to any of that?
I mean, a little bit. There's a little bit of they are who we thought they were, and who I thought they were was probably the best defensive team in basketball. That on the offensive side of the ball, despite the the creative capacity of their two big wings still have some trouble with decision making and, haven't figured out how to truly problem solve against the best defenses. Milwaukee's a great defense with or without Middleton. Miami's a great defense. And so, look, this is still, to me, the best defensive team in basketball. Now, to your point, if Williams isn't entirely mobile, they might not be the best defensive team in basketball. They're still damn good. But yeah, I do think they have some problems to solve offensively. And you see them materialize in the last few minutes of games. I mean, for that matter, throughout both series. I mean, they're not. I just don't think Boston's a great offensive basketball team. But we knew that, and I don't mean that as a knock on them. I mean, I think everyone knows that they're not overly creative, but they are really freaking good as a full package. I mean, I don't do a lot of the, hey, they didn't win and, I remember like the 2008 Boston Celtics almost losing to an Atlanta team or being taken to 7 by an Atlanta team.
Nothing easy.
10 games under 5. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you can, and look, I remember the faux Orlando Magic flameout too. It's like, so I don't, to me, I don't, yes, to the extent that you identify problems that might manifest themselves in a next matchup, yeah, you worry. But the overall contour of the series, and they should have won it easier, or they shouldn't have had to go to 7 against a Middleton-less Bucks. Meanwhile, the Bucks feel like they would have beaten the Celtics in 5 had they, had Middleton been around. But it's interesting. I really excited to see how Boston defends Golden State because they just haven't seen this. Milwaukee had desystematized their offense. It was so ugly by the time we got to that series. Brooklyn, I don't know what they really do. Miami, it's rigor mortis, and they know that. And they're going to have to talk about a team that needs to systematize its offense. I think it's Miami this offseason. But Golden State doesn't do hey, it's mismatch basketball. Right? Let's spread it out, and we're going to find the most agreeable matchup, and we're going to pound the ball into submission, and then we're going to exploit it. And, if we get really excited, we'll do a drive and kick game. Isn't that freaking novel? Right? Like, they don't. I mean, they're not interested. It's not why they got into this business. They're going to slip guys on those screens when the Celtics try to run them off the line and turn them into drivers. There's going to be all kinds of really menacing backside stuff. They're going to try, they're not going to let themselves try to finish over Williams. I mean, I think I'm so excited because Golden State doesn't play basketball the way any other team plays basketball. And it's kind of why I'm always in the tank for them. Because I'm at the point where I see a really uniform league, and then I see a couple of interesting teams that are trying to solve problems differently, and the Warriors are going to be unlike any other team that Boston's defended in the last 6-8 weeks.
I think you nailed one of the. Let's start on that end of the ball then. Warriors offense versus Celtics defense, because I think you nailed one of the most interesting subplots of the series, and it's hardly novel, but the Warriors are the NBA's knuckleball, only if the knuckleball were like faster than the other pitches. It's not a great metaphor, but you've faced fastball, pretty staid NBA offenses. I mean, with great talent and great players, but you can load up and you know what's coming. Now, after, I don't know, how many games have the Celtics played? 14 to 18 games at that over the last, 2 months. You are now thrown into San Francisco to face this thing that moves really fast in unpredictable patterns with stars who play in unpredictable ways. The ball's flying around. And the thing about the Warriors is, and the Mavs just live this, is, well, first of all, number one, the Warriors, after being an average offensive team in the regular season, are the number 1 playoff offense so far. So if you thought they looked a little ragged against the Grizzlies, maybe they did. Maybe you chalk that up to Denver was a little overmatched. Whatever it is, they've come out the wash, number 1 in offense for the playoffs. And you can play, Boston has historically matched up pretty well against the Warriors. Personnel has changed over those years, but Boston has Marcus Smart at the point of attack to guard Steph Curry. There's no one-man answer to Steph Curry, but Marcus Smart might be the best facsimile of that in the league. They've got big wings, high IQ defenders. They can switch. You've got to be able to switch against the Warriors. All of this stuff sounds good, and Boston, as the number 1 defense in the league, will have the best shot of all teams, of not stopping Golden State, but holding them to a place and efficiency at which you can beat them with your own pretty good offense. But you can play all of that stuff perfectly for 15, 16, 18 seconds. A switch over there. Oh, God, we switched that pin down and we didn't give up a back cut. We switched another one. Oh, we didn't switch that one. We read that they were slipping. Oh, God, Draymond has a handoff and there's 2 shooters coming. What are they going to do? Okay, we nailed that. We stayed off of Draymond. Our guards got over screens without giving Steph and Clay any airspace for pull-up threes because we're dropping off Draymond. Oh, no. One more back cut, 19 seconds into the shot clock. We screwed it up. The Warriors got a layup. That's the test ahead of Boston. And I've talked to Richard Jefferson, who played for those Cavs teams, about this very thing you're talking about. The shock and awe of going from the Eastern Conference playoffs to the Warriors offense on the road. Those first 2 games for Cleveland were like, what the hell is going on? We're just trying to get our feet wet in this series, and all of a sudden we're down 2-0. I would be very surprised if Boston wins game 1. And if they win game 1, they're obviously in business. If they don't win game 1, then game 2 becomes an essential game. But I'm with you. I think this is a great challenge for Boston's defense, which, for all the attention on the switching KA and Marcus Smart defensive player of the year against Steph, what the Celtics reminded us against Miami is we're not a one-trick pony. We're not just a switch everything defense. If we need to become a drop defense like the Bucks, we can do that, and we can do it really damn well. And they're going to need to be all of those kinds of defenses at once in the same possession against the Warriors 100 times a game to be able to win this series. So let's zero in on that end. Yeah. Is there a matchup? Is there a scheme thing that really interests you about Warriors offense, Celtics defense?
Well, yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. And I think we dwell too much on individual defenders. And I think one of the things that Boston has done so beautifully all season is just, again, little wrinkles in problem solvings defensively. The way Al Horford will kick out a perimeter guy after, picking up, a switch. Like it's just, it's really interesting what they do, and what makes Golden State challenging is they just don't. A lot of teams make you pay for bad decisions, and the good news is the Celtics don't make a lot of bad decisions defensively. The Warriors make you pay for your good decisions, right? Like they will.
I love that. I'm jealous of that line.
They will make you they will slip that off-ball action just when you think you've figured out. That pin down, and then the next thing you know, oh yeah, look, it's Kevon Looney at the rim, and yeah, he doesn't have he's got good, not great hands, he's got good, not great finishing abilities, but it's enough. And so the matchups are kind of funny. I mean, I don't, it is funny because so many teams are running switching schemes that. We'll sit here and say, oh, so-and-so is going to pick up so-and-so. I was like, yeah, but, now we're 14 seconds into the shot clock and, well, that's gone. I don't know. I mean, you tell me, I always consider you kind of the maven of the matchups in terms of Boston defending, oftentimes you'll let Williams rove off of whoever. I mean, I guess you let him rove off of Looney. I expect obviously Smart to be on Curry. The 2 wings on Thompson and Wiggins, I don't have any strong feelings about one or the other. I like Al on Draymond because I think you do need to pressure Draymond. The idea that you can just kind of help off Draymond, I think, is a misnomer. Yeah, obviously, if he wants to shoot from 21 feet, but he rarely does. But I think you have to pressure the pass against Golden State, and it's something that I think teams miss. It was an old debate they had with Rondo, where everyone wanted to kind of play off Rondo, let him shoot, and you realize playing off Rondo was just a dumb idea, largely because that space can be used, and Draymond does it. So I do think you have to pressure the pass against Golden State. I think you have to turn their wings into drivers. At the same time, be careful what you wish for. So I mean, you're the maven of the matchup. I mean, how do you think this starts?
First of all, you have to be careful with your Rondo-related language when you say playing off Rondo, because there's the strategy of playing off Rondo, and then there's #playoff Rondo, who steps up to the plate in the playoffs.
Off.
So just, for future reference.
Yeah, play space.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. I know what you're saying. I love the line of they make you pay for good decisions. And I highlighted this on Get Up this morning. We had some clips ready to go. It's so easy to say switch all the off-ball actions between the Warriors shooters. Just switch it.
Totally
just
agree
switch
with
it.
you. It's BS.
Well, no, it's not BS. It's just really hard to do because that's what the Celtics will do. The Celtics will try to switch a lot on and off the ball. We'll talk about what they'll do with Horford on Draymond and Looney and Robert Williams on Looney and all that. But when the off-ball action, close your eyes and think of it. When the off-ball action is, let's say, Wiggins screening for Steph off the ball, or anyone screening for Steph and Clay. The shooters are running off the screens. If you want to switch Steph's guy onto the screener, here's what happens. Since it's Steph Curry, you have to be chasing him over the screen. So you're going over that guy that you're switching onto, which means when you switch onto him, you're on his back. And all of the Warriors screeners, whether it's Otto Porter or Andrew Wiggins or Jordan Poole, whoever, are really good at saying, okay, you switched, you're on my back. Boom, zip to the rim, backdoor cut. Yeah. So you can't just say switch that. You've got to switch it. You've got to somehow try to stay in front of them, but you know you're not going to really be able to do that. So the next layer of defense has to be ready for the backdoor cut, and then the layer behind that has to be ready for that layer to help on the backdoor cut. And it's just this chain of reaction that happens in 2 seconds.
When I say it's BS, what I'm saying is we'll switch everything off ball. I suppose is a strategy against the Warrior, but you better have all your off-ball rules in place that apply to how you guard every single one of those guys, and they must be really specific, because now you're looking like you're studying for like some orgo chem test or something. Like I don't like it, it's BS in the sense that to believe that if you just kind of write on that whiteboard, here are the scenarios by which we switch off ball actions, and that somehow there's not going to be a breakdown, because with the Warriors, one off ball action actually moves into another. You'll have those guys will split, and then somebody will run as a split, run to the corner and set a baseline. Like it's not, when I say it's BS, it's that it is not. Like, that's just the beginning of your problems. That's what I'm saying is it's just, I think for a lot of teams, okay, switch the pin down. Fine. We have that mastered. Against Golden State, there are just far too many combination variables, permutations to possibly account for it. I mean, sure, technically you can account for them, but you're going to think yourself into submission, because all it takes those guys is one hesitation, the slightest off balance, off the lock. Like, it's just, it's really hard. And that's why they win lots of championships.
You can see the paralysis by analysis infecting defensive players. It's like, okay, exactly. So I've been told I'm supposed to help off Looney and Draymond. Oh my God, one of the Splash Brothers is about to come off a screen front. Now I got to be but I've been told I've got to be up for that. So I got to run. Oh no, there's a backdoor cut over here. I've been told I have to protect the rim. Oh God, they scored again. Let's go
and by the way,
into the matchups.
What if Draymond keeps on the dribble handoff, right? Oh, well, now you need help coming up.
The play action fake.
Exactly. So like, I mean, look, if anybody can do it, the Celtics can. They're really good at this, and I don't think their sort of prep, schematics get enough credit. I mean, we know they're the number one defense in the league, but it's not just a manifestation of the fact that they have like really good individual defenders. I mean, there's a great scheme there, and they've worked really hard on it over the course of the year, and they made valuable changes to it. But anyway, it's why I love this matchup, is what we're talking about. I mean, it's going to be so much fun to watch. I mean, it's funny, you could watch one of these games and never actually only watch off ball action and have a blast if you're a certain kind of basketball dork, of which I am.
Both of these teams have very nice flexibility between big lineups and small lineups. So let's start the matchup game there at the center position. The Warriors will presumably start the same lineup they've been starting this whole time, which is Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, Looney. Not this whole time, but since Looney re-entered the starting five against Memphis. Thanks to Steven Adams, by the way. Unsung hero in the Warriors playoff run since then is Steven Adams returning to the lineup. The Celtics have made their bones on defense in part by having Robert Williams guard off-ball, corner, shooters, non-shooters, whatever the case may be. That was P.J. Tucker often in the last round. That's been just name a wing guy who's the least threatening wing guy. That's not an option against the Warriors because you're not going to have Robert Williams guarding Klay Thompson. You could, and the idea of him guarding Andrew Wiggins, as I say this out loud, is kind of interesting. It screws with the matchups a little bit. It's kind of interesting because they've really liked Tatum on Draymond Green in a lot of the past matchups the past couple years. That's interesting. I'm bookmarking that in my brain. But if he can't guard Draymond Green, he's likely going to have to guard Looney because I don't think the Celtics will want to really monkey around with the matchups that much and risk Looney going crazy on the offensive glass and stuff like that. So let's just say Time Lord is kind of attached to Looney. And then when you go small, when you go really small, Draymond at center, and you either have the pool party lineup, which the Warriors have steered away from in favor of what I've just taken in my notes to calling the mid-sized sedan lineup with like Otto Porter in place of Poole, and so it's like Wiggins, Porter, Draymond on the front line. You could put Time Lord on Otto Porter. You could put him on Andre Iguodala if Andre plays in this series. Which
I think you could also put him on Draymond.
You could put him. You could. Here's why I point about the Miami series. If he looks in this series like he did in Game 7 of Miami, I don't think he can play against the Warriors' small lineups, and I don't think he can guard Draymond. I think you have to go back and forth like on a yo-yo when you're guarding Draymond.
Well, I was referring to Draymond
being up at the
I was mentioning Draymond at the 4 with Looney still out there.
You could and put Horford on Looney. I don't love that, and so that's where I start with the matchups. And obviously when the Warriors go small, I think the Celtics can also go small, which we'll talk about. And linked to that, I do think in a lot of ways this is a friendlier matchup for Derek White and Peyton Pritchard than the prior 2 or even 3 rounds have been, because the Warriors don't really have a bully ball, isolation, shoot right over the top of you kind of scorer other than Klay Thompson's forays into shooting 18-foot fadeaways over people, which he's good at. So I think that gives the Celtics a little more flexibility to play smaller at times and play Pritchard, who basically got benched out of the rotation against Miami. But I do think starting at least early in games, watching that center matchup is going to be interesting, and whether Robert Williams can make an impact on the series, because his verticality is just a dimension that the Celtics don't have. And it's not just defensively blocking shots. It's when the Celtics have the ball, which we'll talk about later, and they're hunting Steph Curry and the Warriors are hedging like they did against Dallas and Luka. The Celtics are going to get the ball in the paint, and they're going to have opportunities to hit that like Draymond to Looney lob pass, except it's going to be Marcus Smart to Robert Williams, if Robert Williams is there.
I love sort of the discourse and debates around what the Warriors should do, kind of, we'll call it crunch time. But in terms of Porter, the big lineup that starts, and then obviously the pool party lineup. And I don't know if it's a function of age or anything else, but I found myself feeling much better with Porter and Looney and less so with Poole, fully acknowledging that Poole is a wonderfully explosive scorer. That I love the floor stretched any time you can have it stretched. But I also sort of, I don't know, having been on the Warriors the last 2 rounds, and obviously Porter had been hurt. You just start to appreciate defensively how it all works and how Porter, when healthy, preserves the thrust of that defensive scheme and game plan. He's the 6'8" defender who rebounds really well, who makes great decisions as a team defender. And I found myself at times against Memphis and to a lesser extent against Dallas, I would watch Jordan Poole, and I felt like every 4th to 5th possession he would make a small man, not terribly attuned to defense mistake, either with help, either with timing, or he was just slower, or he wasn't anticipatory. And I found myself very comfortable on the Warriors' behalf if they had Porter or Looney in the game late. It was very funny, setting aside that massacre in Memphis, when they came back to San Francisco for Game 6 and Mike Brown was coaching. He sort of gave away his hands as this defensive coach, because at the end it was Porter and it was Looney. Like, you didn't see Poole after a certain point, and the statement was very clear, which is not, it wasn't punitive toward Poole. It was just a coach saying, this is the playoffs, and I know you scored 24 points a game against Sacramento in January, and that's fantastic, buddy. But like we're trying to stop the best offensive basketball guards in the world here, and you are going, we are going to go with the players most capable of running the tightest defensive scheme, plus Steph Curry, because he's Steph Curry. And by the way, doesn't make a lot of those sorts of mistakes. But it is interesting. Like, I think I'm going to find myself on the Warriors' behalf sort of hoping to see Looney and Porter out there in crucial moments. And there might be, crazy as it sounds, moments where Poole is just kind of sitting on the bench, and a moment when actually the Warriors could use a little more offense, but knowing that this is the way home in the final 5 minutes of a game against the East's best team.
Well, I do think they've clearly, that lineup has become the pool party lineup, which, to be clear, is Steph, Clay, Poole, Wiggins, Draymond, very, very small, has clearly become a short burst wild card and not a let's lean on this lineup, at least at this point. I also think there is a place in this series, defensively and offensively, but especially defensively, for Gary Payton II, assuming he can return, Andre Iguodala, if he can return, and Moses Moody, after showing up and playing pretty well and holding the fort against Dallas, in part because of how they will be able to match up against both Tatum and Brown defensively, which we're not talking about that in yet, but I do think both of those guys can play, all three of those guys, rather, can play in this series. The Celtics defensively, their game plan against the Warriors in prior matchups, and again, the personnel has changed, was switch as much of that off-ball stuff as you can from almost no matter who the defenders are, from Peyton Pritchard on the small side to Grant Williams on the big side. Any two defenders in between that spectrum, inclusive of those guys, were switching. Horford and Time Lord on the ball, if it's a Steph pick and roll, we're coming up to the level of the screen, because we have to, or else you're going to shoot threes in our face. But we're not switching. And off the ball, we're going to hang back a little bit off of Draymond and Looney, even on some handoffs, because we're going to count on our guards getting over picks unscathed. And if they don't, we're going to die by the jump shot now and then, but we're confident that they will. That's the split that the Celtics have tried. That's the needle the Celtics have tried to thread in past matchups against this team. And they're excellent defensively, and B, if they prove unable to thread that needle or parts of that needle, and like you said, there are more rules for Golden State and more scenarios than for any other team, they have proven adaptable enough to adjust part of that equation here, part of that equation there. I think this is going to be a really interesting battle. That's been their default, and obviously they can get switchier when they go smaller with Horford at center and Derek White, Smart, Brown, Tatum.
Yeah, this is a broader question for a summer day, and as much as I really appreciate kind of the Warriors switching revolution and its influence on defenses. I mean, there are times, and I find myself frustrated with teams that I think have great base defenses, particularly guards at the point of attack, guys like Smart or say Drew Holiday. I always feel like unbridled switching forfeits that advantage, right? When you have guards who are particularly good at the point of attack. Look, I know you can't, I know you got to, it's one thing to be good point of attack, but if you leave Steph even the slightest bit of space, he could make you pay. But I do like to see teams, and I know, kind of Milwaukee was sort of always at the forefront of this because, people were just on them during the playoff runs to like be more flexible and why don't you switch more, or stop the drop. But I do think kind of playing stuff 2-on-2, even without a switch, is still, if you can pull it off, is the best defense possible. Like, and if you have guards who can blow up screens, if you can get over, if you do have that capacity, it just, look, it just makes life a little easier. Particularly you have, say, Robert Williams, who is healthy enough to kind of be Robert Williams in the bottom 15 feet of the half court, but you need to protect him in the top half. But that's going to be, I'm really curious to see how Boston sort of manages all this, and not to go back to the off-ball stuff, because you do have to have such specific rules when you play Golden State, or you're just going to put yourself in the blender.
And by the way, fundamental to all this, we're just kind of assuming that Marcus Smart is totally healthy. His ankle is going to be ready to go. Certainly he played pretty well in Game 7 against Miami and looked pretty mobile, despite Jimmy Butler going bananas again. If that ankle is compromised at all at any point in this series, and his mobility is compromised at all at any point in this series, again, you can't have mobility compromised against Steph Curry bobbing and weaving all over the floor. If literally every inch of the half court, it becomes difficult. Let's transition to the other end of the floor, which we kind of started with, which is Boston's offense against Golden State's number 2 rated for the season defense, not far behind Boston. And as a jumping off point, I will say this. The Celtics in 93 minutes in the playoffs are plus 26 when Horford is the only big man on the floor. So no Time Lord, no Tice, thank God, no Grant Williams. And that lineup is that essentially means the lineup of Smart, White, Tatum, Brown, Horford. And you could see Tatum and Brown getting more comfortable attacking mismatches when Boston went to that group because they could lift Horford far out into space at the three-point arc. There was no other big man. The paint was clear. The spacing was clear. The lane was open. The passing lanes become clearer. And the reason that's interesting to me is we know what the Celtics are going to do offensively. Give Tatum the ball. Give Brown the ball, but especially give Tatum the ball. Where's Steph? Where's Poole? Bring them up. Have them set a screen for me. We know the Warriors aren't going to want to switch that. We just saw this movie against Luka. Steph's going to hedge. Poole's going to hedge. Steph's become very good at this. I'm going to bang you a little bit and get back to my guy. And they're going to put 2 on the ball for a split second. And if you get around that hedge, or let's say Marcus Smart's the screener, and he slips the screen into the paint and Tatum gives him the ball, whatever it is, we're showing help in the paint early. You are not getting comfortable against us. And we are going to trust our rotations, quarterbacked by Draymond Green, the best defensive player in basketball. We're going to trust our help and our scrambling and our rotations to run and run and run and run and coax you in to either an off-the-dribble 2 or a contested 3 from a shooter that we're okay giving up a contested 3 to. And all of that offense against that defense gets easier when the Celtics are small with better spacing. So that's a battle I'm interested to see, because I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of hunting. We know how the Warriors are going to respond to it by putting 2 on the ball. And they'll do other stuff, which we'll talk. They'll double, they'll trap, they'll go zone and all of that stuff. But that's going to be the fundamental, I think, battle, at least early in this series. And I think the Celtics have, particularly if Time Lord is compromised and can't give them that lob threat, I think they have a better shot at beating it with Horford and 4 guards / wings. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously a healthy Williams is such value defensively, but I'm with you. Horford plus 4 perimeters, I think, works best. I mean, from the Warriors standpoint, you have to be physical against Tatum. You have to make him work while staying in front of him. I agree with you. I think early shifts against the drive and getting out really quickly to shooters, this is something Golden State does well, and it's something that you have to do well against Tatum. And obviously keeping him off the line. I mean, ideally, I think and I hear what you're saying in terms of rotations and throwing the second, third. I mean, I think ideally the extent to which you can make Tatum play one-on-one, it's really, really helpful. And I think if you keep them out of the drive and kick game, it's worthwhile. Now, it's easier said than done. If he starts heating up and he's 7 for 9, obviously you have to revisit that. But it's not that I don't, I mean, because look, I trust, as you said, I mean, with Green on the back line, I kind of trust their rotations, and I trust the sort of the intentionality of their early shifts and their efficacy, and just they're going to be good, right? Like those shifts are not going to be mindless. They're going to take away the amount of space you want to take away against Tatum without compromising you on the back line, because they're just really good at this. I mean, we've been saying it for 8 years, the Warriors are one of the most underrated defensive teams in basketball. Now, they're a little less underrated when Poole and Curry are out there together. And I feel like I'm kind of dragging Poole in this entire podcast, and I feel really crappy about it. But I do think
Poole's really good, and the Warriors are going to need him to give them, whether it's 25 good minutes instead of 35, whatever it is, they're going to need Jordan Poole to win this series.
Yes, they're going to need that microwave. That said, I do think now the Celtics were the most zoned against team in the league this season. I don't know if that's a an anomaly. I don't know if that's that teams see effectiveness in using the zone. And by the way, they were 25th in offensive efficiency against the zone and got crappy shots by and large. That given how eager and successful the Warriors were zoning up against Dallas, who I think in many ways they see Tatum not unlike they see Doncic. In many ways, in terms of offensive attributes and strategy against, as you said, they will be hedging with their smaller guards, with Curry and Poole. They'll be all the stuff behind it. But I do think, Poole and Curry together is always a little bit of a bargain. Because obviously it just gives you shot creation up the wazoo. It gives you stretch. It gives you speed, which they're going to need. I think Golden State's going to play a lot faster than Miami, and they should. And it does kind of keep defensively Boston off balance. But I do think, boy, it's tough for long stretches. Like, they're going to have to be really selective. The more I keep talking myself into it, the more I realize that I trust Looney, even if he gets out on the perimeter. I trust him to recover. I trust him to be able to kind of stay, out of foul trouble and with a driving long wing, step for step. I trust Draymond, obviously, as the best help defender in basketball. And I think size is really important against Boston, and that's going to be the big bargain for Golden State. Like, you have to be, if you're not going to be big, you have to play big. The fortunate thing is they do have guys who are mid-sized sedans who play big, but they're going to need a lot of that. You just have to be big against Boston. And frankly, I think the possession battle, I think that Golden State's a really monster offensive rebounding team with Looney on the floor. And they're going to probably lose the turnover battle because that's what they do. Bless their hearts. It's one of the great Achilles heels that the creative team has as its great tragic flaw, that the creativity translates into turnovers at inopportune times. And that's going to be a thing. But I'm excited to see how they scheme, how much they shift against Tatum, how much they decide they're going to play him one-on-one. How much they take away the drive and kick game. They're not going to sell out the way Miami sells out, but how much are they willing to put themselves into mass rotation? It's such a good matchup, Zach. Such a good matchup.
Well, they showed against the Mavs that they're not afraid to switch Looney sometimes onto your alpha ball handler. And both because they have faith in Looney and because they have faith in Wiggins and especially Draymond behind and aside the main play. Zone, they will play zone. The Warriors will. Maybe a lot of it. The Heat dabbled in it against Boston, and the Celtics tore it up. 1.37 points per possession against the Heat zone. But to state the obvious, you just hit on two themes. Number one, Boston's three-point shooting around Brown and Tatum has always been Marcus Smart, Derek White, Al Horford, Grant Williams. This series just may come down to how many threes those guys hit. Not that the Warriors are just going to give them threes like the Bucks were giving Grant Williams threes, and teams stopped guarding Derek White halfway into the Miami series because he wasn't shooting anything but wide open corner threes. Now that's changed. His confidence seems to be back. He had a monster last 2 or 3 games of that series. But the Warriors are going to treat them a little differently than they treat Tatum and Brown. And they're going to say, if you beat us with contested threes, if we're flying at you and you hit enough threes or you make enough plays off the dribble, those 4 guys, well, then you deserve to win the NBA championship and we lose. And the other obvious thing you hit on is I think the turnover battle is going to be such a huge bellwether in this series. The Warriors were 29th in turnover rate on offense, and the Celtics are pretty damn good at forcing turnovers. The Warriors also pretty damn good at forcing turnovers on defense, actually better than Boston. They were number 7 in turnover rate. This series may just come down to, do we see the Boston team that takes care of the ball, that remains focused, that is calm under pressure, and that turns the ball over at an average rate or better? Or do we see the Boston team that nearly gagged away the Heat series with just borderline inexplicable turnovers, some forced by a reaching, grabbing, swiping team? The Warriors are also a reaching, grabbing, swiping team, particularly if Andre Iguodala can come back, the king of the swipe down. If we see that Boston team and the turnover battle is even or edge Warriors, and that allows the Warriors to get that 3-point machine humming in transition, I think this series starts to look a little better for the Warriors. So those are some obvious bellwethers, I think, right?
Yeah, Golden State, it's very funny because I've been thinking about pace as well. And I think there's just an assumption, Golden State has played well slow. It's kind of contained their turnover problems over the course of the postseason. Like, they played really well slow. And on the other hand, I don't think you want to play slow against Boston insofar as I don't want that defense set. I don't want that length, being able to kind of put the tree trunks over the court all over the place that you have to jump over. I mean, I just think they're so long, particularly with Williams in there and Horford. And frankly, even if Horford is the only big, it's still a really long team. And I don't think you can really afford to play slow down basketball. And yet, at the end of the day, this is where I just really like Golden State, is executionally, they're so strong that even against a set defense, again, they can make you pay for that good decision. They can find the slip off the off-ball action when you were playing high. They're just really good at that. I mean, what do you think of? I mean, the pace thing to me is, look, you and I both know pace can be dictated a lot by the live turnovers. It's not always as telling. But I mean, do you have a preferred pace for either or both teams?
Not really. I just think when you face great defenses, and we saw this in the Boston-Miami series, which was number 1 against number 4 in defense. By the way, this whole finals and conference finals is like revenge of the defense. Until about 5 or 6 years ago, Basketball Reference had a piece about this, a landmark piece, like probably 8 years ago now, that an elite defense was a slightly better predictor of championship equity than an elite offense. And then that has flipped in the last 5 or 6 years as offense has really exploded. This playoffs is the 4 conference finalists were 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 7th in team defense. The Mavs, 7th. How'd you get here? 7th. We're the elite defensive club. How'd you barge in here, Mavs? 7th is pretty good. I don't know where I was going with this. Oh, against great defenses, whatever opportunity you have to run, you have to take. When Jason Tatum misses at the rim and falls over, the Warriors are running. And that's why turnovers are the most obvious ones to me. The Warriors are going to run. It's not running for the sake of running. It's running when there's an opportunity to do it against a team that's so good defensively that if you don't take that opportunity, you're unlikely to score. This is going to sound weird to say because, again, the Warriors had the second best defense in the league. I wonder if playing against a defense that is going to voluntarily get itself into rotation, that is going to voluntarily put 2 on the ball a lot when you hunt Steph and you hunt Poole, is almost going to be healthy for Boston, at least initially, because I think a lot of the credit for how kind of just sometimes sloppy and slow and unfocused Boston looked on offense in the conference finals has to go to Miami. And particularly Miami once Lowry came back. Now, Lowry was a shell of himself on offense, but defensively, he's so stout and switchable compared to Gabe Vincent that all of a sudden the Heat could switch almost everything. Basically, they did switch everything. They lived with Strus on Tatum and Brown and sent help here and there. And I think that got the Celtics kind of in the muck a little bit. And they seem to be at their most turnover prone when Brown and Tatum would just kind of drive one-on-one against Max Strus into a crowd and people would start reaching at the ball. I almost wonder if playing an on-paper and in reality better defense against the Warriors, but one that rotates, is going to unlock their passing game a little bit. Tatum will hit smart on the slip. They can bring a shooter up high on the wing when they know the double is coming as a release valve for Tatum or Brown and say, go make a play. I wonder if it will kind of enliven Boston a little bit in a bizarre way.
I'm going to make a prediction to counter what you're saying. I don't know that the Warriors are going to be as willing to rotate and sell out as we think. I think they know that playing Tatum and Brown one-on-one tends to, I think, be an overall net plus. I think
but you can't. You're not. I know. Steph Curry. You're not switching Curry and Poole onto those guys.
No, of course not. You'll do your hedge. Yes, you will have to rotate up, sure, but get back quick. And I think, and by the way, they did a really good job even on their hedges against Dallas and against Luka. They did a pretty good job of sort of kicking back. Like they were able to kind of get back and stay out of like kind of Miami style, like I just think that that you want to avoid that drive and kick game. And I think the extent to which, yes, they will be early on their shifts. Obviously, they will have their hedges and somebody will Georgia, but they will need to kind of rotate up to account for that. But frankly, like Steph got pretty good at it. Like they were able to kind of buy enough time.
Very good. They were
able to buy enough time to stay out of heavy rotation. And I think that's going to be, I think, an imperative for them. Because I totally agree with you. Boston, it does give Boston a little bit of jolt. It gets them out of rigor mortis. By the way, can we talk about a pet peeve of mine that you mentioned that I'm dying to see somebody do? So I heard this story years ago that in the early Steve Kerr years, they had started noticing that Leandro Barbosa had routinely, anytime he went up for a layup or any shot at the glass that he did not finish, he would fall to the floor, lay out, dude, I drew contact, and then the other team would go off to the races 5-on-4, and it was the Warriors analytics department at the time that at one point came to Leandro at practice and said, look, dude, every time you freaking fall, the other team has a 1.89 efficiency rating. And like, look, we understand you got to sell the contact, but cut that out. And by and large, Leandro started cutting that out, and I am convinced, has anyone... And I think because of the respect that the industry has for you, Zach, I know analytics folks in various departments listen to this religiously. Is there a stat for amount of time player trying to draw contact at the glass, at the rim, falls over, waves hands on back while other team takes off? What is the offensive efficiency? What are you giving up for that charade? Because I think it's 17,400 points per 100 possession.
I'm sure it's a lot. Sometimes it's not a charade, though. Like, these guys are going super fast in the air on the way to the basket with guys leaping at them, nudging them, hitting them. Like, sometimes you fall, and if you fall, you fall. And right. It doesn't take long for the offense to be gone. You could get up as fast as you can as Dillon. You could do the cool parkour pop-up thing and start running back on defense. You're still not going to get there in time. So sometimes it's not a charade. But
no, you're right. Let me verify. Let me clarify. You're absolutely right. Like, I'm not suggesting there are times where you were knocked to the ground and you were on the ground. I'm saying I do find even in high stakes situations, there's a little exaggeration on the floor. I think there's an extra beat or two to sell contact. You're absolutely right. I'm not suggesting guys never get hit and never get thrown to the ground. What I'm saying is I'm noticing even in these playoffs, it's like, there's an extra second and a half. That's a big second and a half. But anyway, that I digress. I could be absolutely wrong here.
Hey, look. Playtime is over, man. Like, the Celtics ain't playing the broken Brooklyn Nets anymore. This isn't the first round. This is a championship. Every single possession matters. Every single possession is important. Don't mess around with that stuff. Let me go back to Boston's offense for a second. And I mentioned the small lineup, or it's not small, just one big lineup with Horford and how good it's been and how it helps their spacing a little bit. Even though it's not a tremendous shooting lineup, just the positioning is different. The downside of playing that lineup for Boston is that it allows the Warriors to play around with the matchups on defense a little bit, particularly when they go smaller, whether it's the mid-size lineup or even the full-on pool party lineup. It allows them specifically to play around with who Draymond Green guards, because in that alignment, if Boston is small, all you need is somebody to guard Horford, and that can be Otto Porter. Otto Porter can guard Horford fine. Draymond can then guard Jaylen Brown. He spent a little time on Jaylen Brown. He can even guard Jason Tatum. I don't think the Warriors want that matchup to be the straight-up matchup very often because they want Draymond to be a helper. But the Warriors have used that matchup here and there. He can guard Marcus Smart. That's another matchup we've seen the Warriors lean into, again, when Boston is small, because Curry can guard Derek White instead of Marcus Smart. It allows them to use Draymond with a little more flexibility without whereas if Boston is big, putting Draymond on anybody but Horford or Robert Williams or Grant Williams requires somebody like Klay Thompson to be guarding Al Horford, which I do think they've used Klay Thompson to guard Kevin Love in the finals before. Klay Thompson's a good post defender. I do think we might see them play around with that kind of inverted matchup on defense. And by the way, another thing about Boston, I don't think it would kill them to give Horford a couple of post touches against friendly matchups. They barely did that against Strus, and he was good out of it. This is going to sound not crazy to Celtics fans who watch it. Like, I wouldn't mind giving Marcus Smart a couple of post touches on Steph Curry just to see if they send help. And it's another way for me to get the passing game going and to just kind of hit Curry a little bit. Like, I think even like Grant Williams, if Curry's stuck on Grant Williams or Jordan Poole's stuck on Grant Williams can do something with that matchup. And against an elite defense that is not going to leave you a lot of answers, that, as you said, is going to be whip smart, nailing every rotation, every switch, running around like the Warriors do. I don't think it's like a terrible idea to go super old school for like 5 possessions a game and play a little mismatch ball with guys who are not Tatum and Brown but have post-up skills.
Yes, on Horford with the surrounded by the 4 perimeters, because I like any offense generated by Al Horford out of the high post. I think it's actually a great way to deploy him when you're surrounded by 4 shooters, or however many shooters you exist in the Smart, White, Brown, Tatum lineup. But yeah, I love playing out of Al in the post. Not necessarily because he'll back in somebody less capable, but because, generally speaking, over the course of his career, good things happen when Al Horford is functioning out of the high post with skilled players around him. So yes on Al in the post. Yes, on Al Horford, everything. I'm very pro Al Horford. Getting to see Al Horford in the finals, or getting to watch him make the finals after playing approximately 4,200 playoff games without seeing a finals was really affirming. Very happy for Al. But yes, all things Al Horford. Zach, I play Al Horford 53 minutes a night in this final.
Well, he might want to play 53 minutes a night. All right, let's end by having the mandatory Steph Curry conversation, which I'm sure Boston fans are thrilled to hear everyone discussing what it would mean if Steph Curry won the Finals MVP. Steph Curry, of course, has not won a Finals MVP. Kevin Durant won 2 of them. Andre Iguodala won the 2015 Finals MVP. And our colleague Max Kellerman is fond of saying that Steph has never been the best player on a championship team, in part because A, Andre Iguodala won that Finals MVP, and B, Kyrie and Kevin Love were hurt. So in some people's eyes, it almost doesn't really count as a full championship, I guess. I've never bought any of that asterisk stuff. It's all nonsense. Look at this playoffs. Everybody's injured all the
nonsense.
time. This is just the way it goes. On the other hand, Kendrick Perkins said last week, igniting a firestorm, a proverbial firestorm, that if Steph were to win Finals MVP, he might surpass Magic Johnson as the greatest point guard of all time. And of course, that got a lot of the old school types up in arms. Do you care if Steph Curry wins the Finals MVP? Is there anything, quote unquote, missing from the legacy of Steph Curry? I can see you. I can feel your stomach turning at the mere mention of the word legacy. You don't care at all.
I don't give a crap. I don't know. I don't. Look. So let's compare and contrast. Steph Curry at age 43, the curls are graying. He is a winner of 4 championships, no MVP awards in the finals, yet 2 MVP awards. The Warriors have redefined how offense and defense has been played in this league, to say nothing about his influence on every youth basketball program in the world. Is there a legacy deficit there? I mean, not if you're rational. I don't know. I don't know, man. I'm the worst guy to ask this of all your guests.
Steph Curry has nothing to prove to anyone, let alone the legacy makers of talking head media. Who really cares if you think he's the 15th greatest player of all time, the 11th greatest player of all time, the 9th greatest player of all time? And yes, winning another championship, a 4th championship, winning a Finals MVP, he would jump, just pick a guy. He would jump that guy and be 12th all time. Does it really matter? Steph Curry's stats in the Finals.
Yeah, what are
26 points a game, 26, 6, and 6 on 38.5% shooting from deep, 58% true shooting, which is pretty damn good. Not supernova like he is in the regular season, but very good. His 2-point shooting has taken a dip, particularly in the finals they lost. He shot 40% from 2 in 2016. But the idea that Steph Curry has, quote, struggled in the NBA Finals is like one of the greatest myths that somehow has taken prevalence in modern NBA discourse. 26, 6, and 6. I voted LeBron James MVP of the 2015 Finals, even though the Cavaliers lost. I have said many times that would I have voted for a Warrior, I would have voted for Steph Curry and not Andre Iguodala, and I love Andre. That should have been Steph Curry's Finals MVP. If it were, none of this is even relevant. Who cares? The Durant signing, like it or not, really kind of warped the NBA and, as a result, NBA discourse in a lot of ways over those years. But look, Steph Curry in 2015, the Warriors were plus 10 per 100 possessions with him on the floor, minus 9 with him off the floor in the finals. And the plus minus generally goes like that in a lot of his other finals. Or they're just in the Durant era, they were just plus a gazillion no matter who was on the floor and who was off the floor. And I always look back at that 2019 finals against Toronto, which they lost, and particularly the end of Game 6 when Klay was hurt and Durant was hurt. And it was Steph and 4 non-shooters on the floor at the same time, and they were still getting good looks because 3 guys were chasing Steph Curry all over the floor when Nick Nurse was not in a box and one designed to chase Steph Curry all over the floor. And, there's Andre Iguodala, hockey assist, Kevon Looney, layup, and it was like this guy is creating all of this by virtue of his unprecedented gravity. To me, I think the perk debate about Magic Johnson is almost more interesting because that's where another title and another Finals MVP is going to nudge him towards. But this idea that he's got something to prove, he's got nothing to prove. It doesn't really matter if he wins a Finals MVP or not. And I can tell you this: Steph Curry gives no what's about any of this. He's not in this this is not fueling him. I'm sure he thinks this is probably all completely ridiculous.
No, he will not be shouting, "I want my respect" into the camera. No, he will not, win or lose.
I do think it's interesting. Just, I mentioned this last week about the point guard conversation. Steph right now has 20,000 points and 5,400 assists on a career shooting line of 47, 43, 91. It's just ridiculous. 43, 91 is just ridiculous. With decent health over the next 4 seasons, he will join the 25,000 point, 6,000 assist club, which consists of LeBron James, Oscar Robertson, Kobe Bryant, Jerry West, John Havlicek, and that's it. And you know as well as I do that 6,000 assists or whatever 1,000 assists he ends up with, you should really multiply that by like 1.5, if not more, to get his true quote-unquote playmaking, facsimile number, because he gets assists, not just hockey assists. He gets, I didn't even really touch the ball assists, but we were in transition and 4 guys ran out to me with their eyes wide open in panic, and Andre Iguodala got a dunk. I don't get an assist for that. The other guy who passed to Andre Iguodala gets an assist for that, but that's all Steph. And, look, he's an 8-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 4-time first-team All-NBA. That's where Magic really has him. Magic's got 9, I think, first-team All-NBAs. 2-time MVP. Magic's a 3-time MVP and a 3-time Finals MVP. Magic obviously is 6'9", can control the game in ways Steph could not with his size. But Steph is already destroying him in points. Assists, he'll never catch Magic. To me, Steph's going to vault past Stockton, Isaiah, Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson's numbers are pretty crazy, though. But I think that's the territory he's already in and already going to be in, even if Klay Thompson averages 35 a game and gets Finals MVP in the 2022 Finals. I just don't know. I guess we have to have this discussion, and it's weird that he hasn't won a Finals MVP, but I don't know. If you've been watching the games, it's like Draymond said on his podcast today, if you've been watching the games for 10 years, I just don't think you can watch the games and be like, well, that guy's got something to prove before I put him in this guy. It's like, okay, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, and this is kind of an abstract observation. I don't know. I prefer debating influence to legacy. I just do, and I think it maybe it's a small distinction. But it's for all the reasons you just charted, right? Like gravity. Is the game, did you leave your mark on the game as a kind of this evolutionary product? Like when you left, years later were the remnants of your game still on every single Tuesday night in January across the league. And I just think with Curry, the influence is incredible. The entire game is played differently. I think what you said earlier in the conversation about how, hey, they are the knuckleballer. Well, they're the knuckleballer. Draymond has a lot to do with that in terms of his kind of contributions. But it's Steph. It's Steph. That's what I'm saying.
It's all Steph.
He's the knuckleballer.
He all Steph.
Charlie Huff times.
It's not all Steph. It's not all Steph.
Draymond
You're
has
right.
a lot
Draymond
to do
as a playmaking big man is a huge part of it. But there have been other playmaking big men before. There has never been an epicenter of a basketball universe like Steph Curry.
Yeah, if you say there is a team that plays differently than the other 29. And by the way, this is not the Doug Moe Nuggets or there have been sort of these anomalous teams that have played who've done. But by the way, and they are also the defining team of their generation. That's influence. That's real influence, along with all the other stats that you cited. And that to me is sort of Steph. It's just like it's been one of the privileges of covering the game for 15 years. Is the whole damn thing has changed. And like when you start charting the reasons why he's at the top of the list, and like, do I care, as you said, that, okay, through some circumstance, there happened to be a teammate who very possibly benefited from that gravity, who outscored him on average over a 7-game series and therefore got a piece of hardware. Like, I don't care. I just don't care. Like, by the way, they won those titles. But anyway, influence to me is more interesting than legacy. I wish we discussed that more and legacy less. And that's my shtick.
You gonna make a pick?
Nah, I never do. I don't know. What do I know? I have no idea. I have absolutely no. Who's healthy? Who's not? I have no earthly idea. And if you ask me, I'd take chalk. Warriors in 7. They got the home team. But I honestly think these are two ridiculously closely matched teams. I tend to like the old guys over the young guys in most of these situations. I just think the NBA has sort of proved that out. I have no empirical. Well, I would say I have no empirical evidence, but so I'll nominally take the Warriors. But if the Celtics whooped them in 6 games, like, honestly, I'm not surprised in the least. The Celtics are really good. What a great story. We were burying this team, Zach. We were burying them, before New Year's. And it's just a great story. I love that they did it. This team goes out, they sign Kyrie, they steal Gordon Hayward, they get these, quote, max guys they import who aren't indigenous to the organization. They're going to, pack the town. They're going to sign Al Horford, an enormous deal. All those max deal guys leave. They're down to their top. They have a starting lineup that includes 4 of their number 1 draft picks in a 6-year span, I think. And oh, by the way, the guy who came back, not on the max deal, but as kind of a 1-year journeyman at the end of his deal in Horford. And like, they did it. And I just love that for the league, man. I love that. No, it wasn't the Kyrie, let's go get Hayward, and everyone's on Twitter on July 5th. Who are you going to get? It wasn't about the acquisitions. It was about the development. And I just think that's a great story. Aside from the defense and everything else, and Tatum's a future star and Brown's fantastic. To me, I love the Celtics because I love how it happened. It didn't happen with those other guys. It happened with these guys. Once you stripped it down and got back to the dudes you drafted. And I love it for them. So I like both of these teams a lot, which is a fun series to cover then.
I don't want to do the full Celtics history download now because we're going to have time to do it in the series. I do think it's ironic that the great criticism of Danny Ainge for so long was that he didn't trade his picks, his stockpile of picks, and these young players, including Jaylen Brown and/or Jason Tatum, for your assorted Paul Georges, Jimmy Butlers, Kawhi Leonards, Anthony Davis's. He got criticized as like a hoarder. But the Celtics, just as you just said, went out and got all of these veterans. They traded for Kyrie Irving, a meaningful draft pick. They used cap space on Gordon Hayward and Al Horford. They even traded for Isaiah Thomas. They not only gave up a pick in that draft, but they made their team so good in the short term that the quality of their pick went down. Hayward, Kemba, on and on. They actually got veterans, and I actually don't think the acquisition of those veterans can be separated from what they're doing now, because although it's the guys that they drafted and didn't trade, somewhat, if not completely redeeming the decision not to trade them when everybody was laughing at the Celtics for having not wanted to trade Jaylen Brown for Kawhi Leonard in 2019. And I was like one of a few people on a little island being like, yeah, Kawhi's going to leave. Yo, if you don't win the title and you lose Kawhi and you lose Jaylen Brown, like you're pretending that's an easy decision. It's not. They went out and got all those other veterans. And I think the benefit from that trickling down today is that those veterans, although they're all gone, helped get these guys deep into the playoffs. And that experience, all the conference finals losses they've had, maybe Tatum and Brown led those teams, but I don't know if they get all the way there without Horford, Hayward, Kemba, Kyrie every single time. I think that experience has steeled them, prepared them, given them a toughness that is unusual for guys who are in their mid-20s, just entering their primes, and has shown through in this playoff. So I think even though those guys are gone, some of what they brought sort of lives on today with this team. I'll end with my pick, which I haven't yet made. And this is not a final pick. I'm going to watch a little more film. I'm going to talk to some more people. I'm going to digest some more information. But right now, I am leaning Warriors in 7. I've picked the Celtics in every round of this playoffs. I was super high on the Warriors before the season. I think the Celtics, top to bottom, are a little better. But I think the health is trending in opposite directions. I think the Warriors are rested and getting healthier, and the Celtics just went through a gauntlet and are banged up a little bit. The knuckleball effect in games 1 and 2 scares me from Boston's perspective, and the potential home court in game 7, although Boston just wins on the road all the time. And the Warriors are awesome. So I'm leaning a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I had Boston winning the title. I was going to pick Boston every round of the playoffs. Right now, I'm leaning Warriors in 7, but I'm expecting and hoping to get a great series. If this somehow doesn't reach 6, either way, I will be dumbfounded. I'm hoping for 7, baby. Let's go the distance.
I hope so too. It's a great matchup.
Kevin Arnovitz, you're the best. I'll see you soon at the NBA Finals. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.